And now we have Washington on the line again regarding Trump's sanctions against Russia, as well as the visit of Putin's special representative to America. We will talk with TSN's special correspondent Olga Koshelenko, who I hope can hear us now. Just like that. So negotiations between Witkoff and Dmitriev are scheduled for tomorrow. Will there be meetings with other officials? What should we expect in general? After all, considering Witkoff's previous statements, whenever his name comes up, Ukrainians tend to react with some concern.
Yes, it's a holiday. Congratulations. Indeed, according to a report in Axios, Dmitriev will meet with Witkoff tomorrow, but not in Washington, rather in Miami. But other high-ranking officials from the Trump administration are unlikely to even have the physical opportunity to meet with him, since this evening Donald Trump and his entire team are heading out on an Asian tour. In particular, Trump will meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping next Thursday. And Putin is highly dependent on all of them economically. And now Trump has promised to talk with him in particular about China's purchase of Russian oil. It's very interesting to watch the indirect dialogue between Putin and Trump right now. Yesterday, the Russian leader said that it was Trump himself who suggested meeting in Budapest and that he, Putin, insisted at the time that the meeting should be properly prepared, so now it's simply postponed. White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre also said earlier that a meeting between the presidents will happen someday, but there are no specifics at all. The American president is not hiding anything. He cancelled meetings with Putin because he realized that it would not lead to the desired goal, namely a ceasefire in Ukraine. He complained, saying that every time he talks to Putin on the phone, the conversations are good, but then they lead nowhere. So this week, he imposed sanctions on two major Russian oil companies. This concerns Lukoil and Rosneft, as well as more than 30 of their subsidiaries. Together, they make up 5% of the global oil market. And now these companies are effectively cut off from the international payment systems market. And due to fears of secondary sanctions, no one can deal with them directly. But the day before, Putin confidently declared that this would not have a significant impact on the Russian economy. He said it wouldn't, even though the move is, in his words, unfriendly. And Trump responded in the style of, "He who laughs last, laughs best."
President Putin said today that Russia is essentially immune to American sanctions, that they will not seriously affect its economy.
I'm glad he feels that way. That's good. Let's talk in 6 months. We'll see how it goes.
And note that these are the first anti-Russian sanctions from the United States since Trump's return to the White House. The previous administration also, as much as it could, avoided imposing sanctions specifically against the Russian oil industry for a long time. Only at the end of his term did Biden impose restrictions on two other smaller Russian oil companies, Surgutneftgaz and Gazpromneft. The reason was the fear of rising prices on the global market. If Russia leaves this market, its share of the global market is about 9%. In fact, that's exactly what has happened now. Amid this news about sanctions, oil prices on the global market have risen by 5%. And the main buyers of Russian oil, India and China, are suspending purchases from Russia because they fear secondary sanctions from the US, according to Reuters sources in the industry.
US sanctions have prompted major Chinese state oil companies to suspend purchases of Russian oil in the short term, industry sources told Reuters. Refineries in India, the largest buyer of Russian seaborne oil, intend to sharply reduce their oil imports, industry sources report.
Putin's claim that this will not have a significant impact on their economy is not without logic. The Kremlin has learned to circumvent such sanctions with the help of the so-called shadow fleet. This is when unmarked, uninsured vessels secretly deliver cargo and payments are made through third countries. But much here will depend on how thoroughly the United States and the EU are able to identify and sanction these shadow fleet vessels, these essentially modern ones. And Russia as well. These shadow schemes are quite costly. Until this week, that is, before the sanctions were imposed, it was forecast that Russia's oil and gas revenues would decrease this year to about $100 billion from $135 billion last year. Polly.
Thank you. Olga Koshelenko, in fact, the TSN correspondent in the United States, helped us figure out what stage things are at right now. What is the current state of relations between the White House and the Kremlin? How serious are Trump's sanctions? And how is Putin trying to fix the situation, if he is trying at all, to strengthen Ukraine on the battlefield now and guarantee its security in the post-war reality? These topics were discussed at the summit of the so-called Coalition of the Willing. It brings together about 30 countries that are ready to participate in security guarantees for Ukraine. When the weapons fall silent, the meeting took place in London. The United Kingdom, together with France, I remind you, is leading the partners' efforts to provide support in Ukraine peace. We will find out how it all ended from Radio Svoboda's correspondent in Europe, Zoriana Stepanenko. She is live with the TSN studio right now. Zoriana, what was discussed at the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, and against the backdrop of Washington's peacekeeping efforts seemingly being on pause, what steps is Europe preparing?
Greetings, Sviate. On the agenda of today's meeting of the Coalition of the Willing is, first and foremost, the goal of ensuring peace in Ukraine. Then discussions about actually bringing that peace closer. The participants agree that this is only possible if pressure on Russia is increased. Many have spoken about a possible new impetus in the diplomatic process, given the US president's plans to meet with Vladimir Putin again. Donald Trump, however, changed these plans and instead, for the first time during his second term in the White House, imposed sanctions against Russia's energy sector. Volodymyr Zelensky, who is currently visiting London and therefore joined the coalition meeting in person, welcomed these steps and expressed hope that they indicate the possibility of tomahawks for Ukraine in the future.
As soon as Putin felt the pressure and the possibility of tomahawks appearing in Ukraine, he immediately declared his readiness to resume negotiations. But as soon as the pressure disappeared, he once again rejected diplomacy. So for us, it's clear what needs to be done. We need greater capabilities for deep strikes.
Zelensky has reiterated that the starting point for negotiations, which Ukraine is ready for, must be the current line of contact. The Ukrainian president rejects Putin's demand to hand over Donbas territories not under Russian control to Russia. And in this, he was actually supported by the partners in the Coalition of the Willing, who simultaneously made commitments to continue helping Ukraine today so that peace accordingly can come tomorrow.
He once again refused the possibility of negotiations, instead putting forward absurd demands regarding Ukrainian land that he could not and did not seize by force. Of course, this is absolutely unrealistic. And this once again shows that he is not serious about peace. Today I am announcing that we are accelerating our British supply program. More than 5,000 light multi-purpose missiles for Ukraine.
Also present in person in London were the heads of government of Denmark, the Netherlands, and Secretary-General Mark Rutte, who this week flew to meet with the President of the United States. This happened after Trump changed his mind about meeting with Putin in Budapest and hit Russia with sanctions, which he had previously delayed, giving diplomacy a chance.
The sanctions that the US imposed against the largest Russian oil companies will deprive them of revenue and significantly increase the pressure on Putin. Ukraine continues to bravely defend itself, and our support is yielding results. The truth is that Putin is running out of money, troops, and ideas. President Trump put it very well. They must stop where they are now. And now is exactly the time to increase the pressure on Russia.
The introduction of oil sanctions against Russia by the United States in close coordination with the new 19th round of EU restrictions as well as British sanctions was welcomed by all coalition members who, after the meeting in particular, spoke to the press. These are all the leaders who were present in London respectively in person. They consider this a major step, and the President of France, who joined the coalition meeting online, called for the development of the next 20th package of EU sanctions and confirmed the plans to deploy a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine when the weapons fall silent there.
We also have plans to deploy multinational forces in Ukraine after the cessation of hostilities, with the aim of ensuring the security of Ukraine's airspace and maritime areas, as well as restoring the armed forces of Ukraine with the support and participation of 25 member countries.
So the priority of the Coalition of the Willing is to ensure peace through strength. And attention was also given to Ukraine's financial needs so that it can continue to resist Russian aggression. In particular, to purchase weapons, develop its long-range capabilities and cover the budget deficit. On the table is the idea of providing what is called a reparations loan based on Russia's immobilized assets. And although yesterday's EU leaders' summit in Brussels showed that they are far from reaching an agreement on this loan, primarily due to Belgium's legal concerns. Still, they speak of having the political will to find a solution, and the deadline for this is set for the end of 2025, since Ukraine's financial needs are already being considered for 2026. That's all.
Thank you for these details. Radio Svoboda correspondent Zoriana Stepanenko live on TSN about the new meeting of the Allies coalition. It took place in London with the participation of the Ukrainian president and the leaders of our partner countries.